3 hours earlier, they were clinking champagne glasses over million-dollar real estate deals. But before midnight, a wealthy husband abandoned his 8 months pregnant wife on a fog-covered mountain road with no signal, no help, and no way home. What he didn't know, every word was being recorded. And hidden in the trees nearby was the one person who could destroy everything he built. Tonight, S. punishment was supposed to break her. Instead, it became the beginning of his downfall.
Just hours ago, I was at the pinnacle, clinking champagne glasses with my husband Mark, celebrating the new funding for his tech empire. He was beaming through dessert, but in the car, his whole demeanor changed. As his G-Wagon veered onto a deserted coastal cliffside, I knew this was it. "Out," Mark said, his voice flat, the engine humming. "You need to learn your place, Chloe." He figured a long walk in the rain would teach me some humility. He de-planned this, no signal, miles from anything. What he didn't know is that for the last year, I'd been recording everything. My brother Ethan was hidden just up the road, waiting for my go-ahead. The expensive leather squeaked as I turned to Mark. His jaw was set with that familiar arrogance he wore after crushing a competitor. Hours earlier, we celebrated his victory. Now, he was dumping his pregnant wife on a cliffside because I'd questioned a charge for a private jet charter I found in his study. "You're actually doing this?" I said, keeping my voice steady for the microphone. "Consequences, Chloe. You question me. You pry into my business. You make me look weak with your stupid little concerns. Maybe this walk will remind you who runs things around here." In my bag, I had the flight manifest. His mistress Sophia S. name was right there next to his. The trip probably already happened, but I kept quiet. For now, Ethan and I had a plan, and I had to stick to it. "A storm is coming in off the ocean," I said, gesturing at the dark clouds. "Then you better get moving," he shot back, gripping the wheel. "Unless you want to beg for my forgiveness and admit you were wrong. If you think no one deserves to be left alone in a storm like this, please subscribe. It costs nothing and helps us share important stories like this one." A year ago, I would have begged him to let me stay. I still thought our marriage had a chance. That was before I found the hidden server with his company's real financial records. Before I learned about the shell companies and the trusts designed to lock me out. The second I started digging, he turned vicious. This was supposed to be his checkmate, but it was about to be his downfall. "I'm getting out," I said, pushing the door open. "Good. Maybe the cold will clear your head." I stepped out onto the muddy shoulder. The spot was just a pull-off with a flimsy guardrail over a long drop to the rocks below. Mark chose this spot for its brutal beauty. He even mentioned it last week. "Can you imagine being stuck out here?" He dead chuckled. That S when his plan clicked into place for me. The G-Wagon S engine idled beside me. His phone lit up, probably a message to Sophia saying the deed was done. He gunned the engine, spitting mud and gravel, and disappeared into the mist. I waited a full minute, watching his lights fade. Then I walked over to the grove of fir trees where Ethan S' beat-up Jeep was parked. My brother got out with a wool blanket and a flask of hot cocoa. "Did you capture it?" he asked, every last syllable. I showed him my phone and hit stop on the recording. He told me to learn my slice. Ethan just shook his head, furious. "I've watched him chip away at you for years, but this," he waved a hand at the empty road. "This is reckless endangerment. Miss Sterling will dismantle him with this recording." I grabbed the cocoa, the heat sinking into my cold hands. The mist was a heavy, cold rain now. By sunrise, Mark would picture me wandering the cliffs, panicked and defeated. He'd be waiting for me to crawl back, begging. "Is our accountant set?" I asked. She's been standing by all night. The minute that charter jet was booked, she was on it. The audit covers the last 3 years. He's been funneling corporate funds into secret accounts, getting ready to file for divorce and leave you with absolutely nothing. And Miss Sterling is filing the motion first thing tomorrow morning. endangerment, wire fraud, coercive control. She says with this tape and our financials, he is completely cornered. We got into Ethan's Jeep just as the real storm began. Rain pounded the glass. I imagined Mark driving back, feeling powerful, probably pouring a scotch to toast his little victory. He had no idea that when he started hiding his assets, I started building a team. Ethan had rigged our waterfront condo with tiny cameras hidden inside the smart home hubs. Our accountant, an expert in tech fraud, had been watching every wire transfer. And Miss Sterling, the sharpest family law attorney in the city, had already assembled a case that took up an entire hard drive. The Condo S audio feed just synced, Ethan said, looking at his phone. We recorded him bringing Sophia over last week when you were at your sister S. They were in your home office. A calm, steely feeling settled over me. The hurt was long gone. This was about accountability. He's been setting this up for years, I said, isolating me, controlling the money, the constant mind games it as textbook. Miss Sterling mentioned that judges have a real problem with tech moguls who leave their pregnant wives on a cliffside as some kind of lesson. Ethan drove through the storm easily, using back roads so Mark wouldn't see us. He'd have practiced this route. Nothing was left to chance. The motel was reserved under my sister's name, paid for in cash. Ethan had been taking out for weeks. My go bag was in the room, along with backups of all our evidence. You know he will start searching when you don't come home, Ethan said. I'm counting on it, I told him. The lobby cameras will capture me arriving alone, drenched and terrified. The clerk will report that I was crying too hard to speak clearly. Miss Sterling had walked me through the entire performance. The rain intensified as we got closer to town. Mark was probably home by now, texting Sophia about how he finally put me in my place. Tomorrow, he'll wake up expecting to see me broken on the doorstep. Instead, he'll find accounts are frozen solid and federal investigators have questions about his offshore dealings. Are you ready for this? Ethan asked as we saw the Motel S sign. I thought about who I was before Mark spent 5 years grinding me down. I could still hear his voice on the recording, telling me to walk home in a storm. I thought about Sophia S.'s trip to Monaco, the secret funds, and the ironclad prenup he tricked me into signing, which left me with nothing. I've been ready for the past year, I said. He'd had just given me the last piece of proof we needed to bury him. Ethan pulled into the motel's back lot. I grabbed the small duffel bag, just enough to look like I ran with nothing, and got out into the rain. It was time to play my part, the terrified, abandoned wife. Tomorrow, Mark would learn who was really in charge. The lobby was blindingly bright after the dark coastal road. Water pooled around my feet as I approached the counter, making sure my hands were shaking. The night manager, a woman with a gentle face, saw me and immediately came over with towels. "Oh, honey, are you okay?" she asked, wrapping a towel around me. "My husband," I choked out, letting my voice break. "He left me out on the cliffs. On Ocean Drive, he just left." Her look went from worried to horrified. Excellent. This would all be in the manager S log, just like Miss Sterling wanted. The woman got me a chair and some tea while she handled my check-in. I used my maiden name, Chloe Miller, and paid with a backup credit card Mark knew nothing about. Room 207 was simple, with a view of the wet, empty street. I locked the door, slid the chain, and took a deep breath. I pulled out the burner phone Ethan gave me and played the recording. Mark S.'s voice, cold and arrogant, filled the quiet room. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Pestering my investors, asking about my company like you. Have any clue how it works?" Then came my voice, calm and measured. "It as our life, Mark. I deserve to know what S happening." He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "My money. I earn it. You spend it. On charity galas and old books. $500 on some vintage architecture book, Chloe." 500. I remembered that book. It was for a design for our baby's nursery. He'd been furious about the book because I was supposed to be Sunny running errands for a dinner he was hosting. The same dinner where he spent $10,000 on a case of wine. The recording continued with another one of his tirades. "You embarrassed me last week, Chloe, correcting me on structural engineering in front of my own board. Where do you get off? I have an MBA from Stanford. You used to design suburban houses. Before I met you, I was a lead architect at a top firm. Before I saved you from a dead-end career, I gave you all of this." I closed my eyes, remembering the person I was before he broke me down. I didn't just design user interfaces. I wrote the original code for our multi-million-dollar app. But Leo had rewritten our company's origin story so many times, I think he believed his own hype. My phone vibrated. A text from Evan, my PI. He found them. 3 hidden servers in the Caymans. He'd been siphoning company funds for 2 years. 2 years. I remembered how the lies began. The sudden need for separate business accounts for, quote, liability protection. The new CFO who was his college buddy. The pile of documents he rushed me to sign some, saying it was just a formality. "Just trust me, Amelia." Another message came through. This one was from my lawyer, Clara. "Judge Ramirez has granted an emergency injunction for tomorrow at 1 p.m. Bring the phone." Judge Isabella Ramirez was famous for demolishing tech bros with egos like Leo S. She'd handled 3 nasty startup divorces this year, and each wife walked away with the whole company. Clara had waited for an opening on her calendar. I changed into fresh clothes from the emergency bag I'd packed, then sat down and began to write. Not the official legal statement, but notes for myself, a list of everything Leo had tried to take from me. I wrote about the tech incubator I'd been invited to join, which Leo claimed would be too stressful for the baby. The downtown Austin property I'd found that would have tripled my net worth, if I still had one. The friendship with my old coding mentor that died after Leo convinced me he was just a jealous has-been. My phone rang. Leo's face on the screen. I sent it to voicemail, then played it on speaker, recording it on a second phone. "Amelia, this is just getting old. It's been 3 hours. You've had your little tantrum. Call me back, and I'll come get you. Don't make this a bigger deal than it is." 10 minutes later, another call. His voice was colder this time. "I know you have that phone. Stop acting like a child and answer me. If you think this little disappearing act is making me worry, you're dead wrong. I'm going to bed. You can find your own way home." But I could hear the slight edge of panic in his voice. He was realizing this wasn't in his script. I should have called by now, apologizing, begging to come home. My silence was breaking his control. At midnight, a call came from a blocked number. Something told me to pick up, but to stay quiet. "Hello, Amelia?" It was Sophia. Her voice was trembling. "Leo asked me to call you. He's really, really worried. He said you two fought and you won't take his calls. He wants you to know he's sorry and he just wants you to come home safe." Leo never said the word sorry. He never admitted he was wrong, not once. The fact that he sent his mistress to deliver a fake apology told me everything. He was rattled. I ended the call without a single word. By 1 a.m., the calls were coming every 15 minutes. Leo, his mother, even his co-founder, Eric. I recorded every single voicemail, noting the time, the number, and the rising tide of panic is in their voices. A distraught, pregnant wife was supposed to be desperate, not unreachable. I ordered room service on his black card. A steak, truffle fries, and a fancy mocktail. Let the receipt prove I was celebrating, not crumbling. Let it show I wasn't having the emotional breakdown Leo fully expected. At 2:30 a.m., a text lit up my screen that made me smile. It wasn't from Leo, but from our neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. "Saw Leo in your garage with a flashlight, messing with your server rack." Then he sped off. "Everything okay, dear?" He was looking for my backup drives. Not realizing Evan had moved the originals to a secure data vault last week. It was another perfect piece of evidence, proof that I had planned my escape long before he abandoned me at that fundraiser. I pulled open the curtains and watched the rain lash the city. Somewhere out there, Leo was beginning to realize his perfectly controlled world was falling apart. He thought he did, taught me a lesson about who was in charge. Tomorrow, when the market opens and he finds his crypto wallets frozen, when his key card to the office is denied, and when 2 FBI agents show up asking about intellectual property theft, he'll finally learn who was teaching whom. The rain hammered against the window. 8 months of planning, of documenting every transaction, of playing the part of the compliant, supportive wife while I built the case that would ruin him. It all came down to this perfect storm he had brewed all by himself. I set my alarm for 7 a.m., knowing I needed to look convincingly shattered for the hearing. Clara would be here at noon to prep, but for now, for these last few hours, I just sat in the dark and felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Freedom. The morning sun sliced through the curtains at exactly 7. I'd been awake since 5, my laptop open, watching our joint investment account. The numbers were just what I'd expected. Leo had already attempted to transfer $100,000 at 6:47 a.m. He was scrambling, trying to hide every asset he could before I found them. A little late for that, darling. My team had already flagged everything. By noon, my hotel suite was a command center. Ava, my forensic accountant, arrived first, hauling 2 briefcases filled with hard drives, her usual sharp lipstick a bit smudged. She spread the evidence on the table: blockchain transfers, shell corporations, forged investor reports, all neatly organized. The Cayman servers were officially locked down as of 9 a.m. this morning, she said, showing me a detailed chart. Leo tried to gaze access 3 times right after dawn. He's probably losing his mind. Clara walked in next, phone pressed to her ear, rattling off legal jargon. She ended the call and gave me a grimly satisfied look. Judge Ramirez moved our hearing up to 1 o'clock. She wants to see this now. Also, Leo just retained Marcus Thorne. The Vulture? Evan asked, walking in with a case of audio equipment. The same lawyer who got that pharma CEO acquitted on insider trading charges last year. Thorne doesn't work for cheap. Leo must be liquidating assets like crazy to pay his fee. I felt a quick jolt of fear, but Clara put a reassuring hand on my arm. Thorne is a shark, but he can't argue with encrypted server logs and a clear money trail. Besides, he's walking into this completely blind. We've had 8 months to prepare for this exact moment. Evan connected his laptop to the hotel's TV, and the screen flickered to life with a camera feed of our home office. I pulled the highlight reel, if you want to call it that. Just be ready, Amelia. This part is rough. The first clip showed Leo in his study at 3 a.m. 2 weeks ago. I was upstairs, dead asleep, thanks to the pregnancy-safe tea he'd started making me. On the screen, Leo was using a scanner to copy every document from our fireproof safe, then putting them back in perfect order. The files included our original company patents, my parents' trust documents, and the deed to the lake house my grandfather left me. He was creating a digital ghost file, Ava said quietly, making forgeries with tiny alterations. If you hadn't found that burner phone, he would have replaced every original with a fake. The next video was somehow even worse. It was Leo and Sophia in our media room from a month ago, a night he told me he was meeting with venture capitalists. She was wrapped in my favorite cashmere throw. They were laughing at something on his phone. Make it louder, I said, my voice tight. Leo's voice echoed in the suite. She actually bought that the server migration was a mandatory all-nighter. I've got her so well trained. A few more weeks and the IP sale goes through. Then we can finally get rid of this charade. Sophia's shrill laugh cut through the air. And the prenup makes sure she gets absolutely nothing, right? The prenup doesn't matter. She'll never fight me. Amelia doesn't have the spine. By the time she even figures it out, we'll be in Singapore and she'll be too heartbroken to call a lawyer. Evan hit pause, and the only sound was the air conditioner's low hum. I got up and went to the window, staring down at the Austin skyline. Somewhere down there, Leo was probably in his glass office, wondering why his login failed, why his private banker wasn't answering, and why his perfect world was suddenly imploding. "There's more," Evan said softly. "Do you want to see it?" I just gave a slight nod. The next clip was Leo in our garage, pacing on the phone. The timestamp was from last Tuesday, during my prenatal yoga class. "Maya has been a godsend," he was saying. "She has no idea I'm recording her. Every detail about Amelia's family trust, her father's health, the inheritance her grandmother set up. It's a portfolio worth almost $5 million, and Amelia had no idea it even existed." My knees buckled. Maya, my own sister. I'd been paying off her credit card debt for years, lying to our parents to protect her, and she was selling family secrets to Leo. "When did he first contact her?" I whispered. Ava pulled up the phone records. The first Venmo payment was 14 months ago, with calls starting a year ago. Always when you were out of the house. He was paying off her student loans in exchange for information. Ava glanced at her phone. "We need to be at the courthouse in 30 minutes. Sarah, are you sure you want to see this?" Jessica asked, her voice soft. I turned from the rainy San Francisco view. "Show me. I need to see it all." David, her paralegal, slid a laptop over. "This is from the encrypted drive you found." We just cracked the last folder. On screen, I saw emails between Mark and his lawyer, dating back months. The subject was exit protocol. It laid out a plan for our divorce, a strategy to make me question my sanity, drain our joint accounts, and use my own emotions against me until I broke. Then one line made my blood run cold. "The goal is to induce psychological distress." It read, "Move objects. Deny entire conversations. Make her question her own memory. By the time we serve the papers, she'll be too broken to fight back." I flashed back to all the little things this past year. The pitch deck Mark swore I'd lost. The dinner with investors he claimed I forgot about. Keys vanishing from the hook, only to show up in the freezer. I'd even started keeping a private log, thinking I was developing early onset Alzheimer's. He wasn't just cruel, he was following a playbook. "This lawyer," Jessica said, "he's infamous for scorched earth tactics. He helps wealthy spouses disappear assets and leave their partners destitute. He's also being investigated by the state bar." Jessica brought up another file. "And this is the smoking gun. It's why we had to move fast. It was a wire transfer. Yesterday, Mark moved $5.8 million from Etherea's investor fund into an offshore account. Right before he left me stranded. He was making a run for it," I breathed, connecting the dots. This wasn't just about escaping our marriage. He was supposed to be exposed for fraud. "The bank's compliance team received an anonymous flag on the transfer this morning," Jessica said, with the faintest hint of a smile. I stared at her. "That was you." Jessica simply nodded. "We had a legal and ethical duty to report felony wire fraud." The full picture was sickening. This went way beyond our marriage, beyond his cheating. Mark was a professional grifter. He'd used our life, our company, as a shield while he fleeced our investors and plotted his escape. He wasn't just destroying me. He was about to ruin everyone who believed in our startup. "Judge Evans needs to see everything," I said, my voice like steel. "Every email, every transfer, every lie." Jessica's smile was sharp. I could see why she was the best. "Oh, she'll see it all," Jessica promised. "And Mark Sterling will finally learn what it feels like to have nothing." The courthouse was all imposing columns and echoing marble, designed to intimidate. I walked down the hall in a navy blue suit Mark had never seen, one I bought specifically for this moment. Jessica was on my right, David on my left. We walked into courtroom 3C at 1:45 p.m. Mark was there with his attorney, Daniel Croft, a man whose tailored suit couldn't quite mask his panic. But Mark himself just looked deflated. The charismatic CEO was gone, replaced by a man with a rumpled collar and shadows under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept. When our eyes met, his exhaustion morphed into pure, undiluted fury. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Evans entered, her presence commanding the room. She sat, put on a pair of reading glasses, and scanned the documents in front of her. "We are here for a this emergency motion filed by Sarah Sterling concerning asset seizure and spousal abandonment," she announced, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Mr. Croft, I understand you've just been retained this morning?" "That's correct, Your Honor. We request a 30-day continuance to get up to speed." "Denied," Judge Evans snapped. "Your client allegedly abandoned his pregnant wife on a remote road during a storm last night. We're not waiting." She looked to Jessica. "Counselor, proceed." Jessica stood. "Your Honor, at 10 p.m. last night, Mark Sterling left his wife on a service road in the Marin Headlands, miles from anywhere in a severe rainstorm. We have a recording." She played it. Mark's voice, crisp and cold, filled the silent courtroom. "You're ungrateful, Sarah. Maybe a long walk home will fix that." Mark's face turned ashen. Croft was whispering frantically in his ear, but Mark just sat there, stunned. "Furthermore," Jessica continued, "Mr. Sterling has been systematically hiding assets for over a year. We have evidence of offshore accounts containing $12 million plus the $5.8 million in wire fraud." "Objection," Croft yelled. "These are baseless accusations." "Then let's give them a basis," Jessica said coolly, dropping a thick binder on the desk. "Exhibits A through G, Your Honor. Transfers to shell corporations, all executed by Mr. Sterling without his wife's knowledge." Judge Evans flipped through the pages, her expression hardening with each one. "Mr. Sterling, did you abandon your wife last night?" the judge asked. Mark got to his feet. "Your Honor, we had a fight. It was a simple disagreement. It's a yes or no question." Yes, I left her, but she had her phone." "She wasn't helpless." The judge just stared at him. "How considerate." She turned back to Jessica. "Please continue." Jessica projected bank statements onto the screen. Mr. Sterling was also conducting an affair with his COO, Maya Chen, using company funds for lavish trips and gifts, including a $50,000 sculpture, which was later reported as stolen for an insurance claim, but was in fact a gift to Miss Chen. My phone vibrated. A text from David. "They've arrived." The large doors at the back of the court opened. An agent from the FBI's white-collar crime unit entered, flanked by two others. Mark's head whipped around, and I saw raw primal fear on his face. "Your Honor," the agent said, addressing the judge, "apologies for the interruption. We have a warrant for the arrest of Mark Sterling on charges of wire fraud and securities fraud." Croft leaped up. "This is an outrage, Your Honor." "So is stealing $5.8 million, Judge Evans replied calmly. She gestured to the agents. "Gentlemen, if you'll wait until we're finished. Mr. Sterling won't be leaving." Mark slumped into his chair. His phone, lying on the table, began to light up relentlessly. I could see the names his father, his co-founder, and over Maya. "Given the evidence," Judge Evans declared, "I am granting the motion. All shared assets are frozen, effective immediately. Miss Sterling is granted sole use of the marital home and temporary spousal support of $20,000 a month." "$20,000?" Mark shrieked, bolting upright. "That's insane. She doesn't need that kind of money." "Mr. Sterling," the judge's voice cut through the air, "you left your pregnant wife on a roadside after stealing. Consider yourself lucky. I'm not holding you in contempt." Mark collapsed back into his seat. Just then, my own phone buzzed. It was Maya. I hit ignore. She called again and again. Jessica leaned over. "Screenshot that." I did. My call log was a nightmare. 15 missed calls from Maya, 50 from Mark, a dozen from friends, and a slew of numbers I didn't know investors, probably. Just getting the news. The FBI agent approached our table. Ms. Sterling, we'll need your cooperation. Your lawyer mentioned you have extensive records. I nodded. Months' worth of documents, emails, everything. It's all there. He's looking at 20 to 25 years if convicted, the agent said, just loud enough for Mark to hear. That did it. Mark shot up, pointing a trembling finger at me. You planned this. This was all a setup. Judge Evans's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Mr. Sterling, one more outburst and you'll be in a holding cell. Mark completely unraveled. The drive, the transfers, you found everything. So you admit you abandoned her? The judge interjected. His lawyer tried to shut him up, but Mark had already confessed in open court. As the hearing ended, the courtroom doors flew open and Maya Chen stormed in, her designer suit disheveled. She locked eyes with Mark. You told me you were single, she screamed. You said the divorce was final. You told me she was crazy and obsessed. The judge just rubbed his temples. Ma'am, you are not a party to this case. But Clara wasn't leaving. She waved her phone in the air. I have texts. I have wire transfers. He said we were building a future. He said this money was from his own bonuses. My lawyer's eyes went wide. He approached Clara with a calmed demeanor. Ma'am, I think my client and I would love to hear what you have to say. Ethan's entire world imploded right there. His mistress was about to become our star witness. His accounts were frozen, and his carefully crafted reputation as a brilliant venture capitalist was gone in less than an hour. As we left the courtroom, my phone buzzed. A text from Catherine, Ethan's mother. I hope you're satisfied. Destroying a good man's life because you felt neglected. I didn't even bother to reply. Catherine would learn soon enough that her son was a con artist who had finally run out of tricks. I didn't destroy him. His own greed did that. Outside, the courthouse steps were swarming with reporters. Someone had obviously leaked the story, probably a court officer who recognized Ethan's name from the financial news. Microphones were shoved towards me, but my lawyer Sarah kept a protective hand on my back, guiding me through the mob. Mrs. Sterling, is it true your husband defrauded his investors? Ava, what will happen to his firm? Are you filing for divorce? Sarah cut them all off with a voice that commanded respect. My client will not be making a statement. This is now a federal matter. We finally made it to Ben S. car as a news crew was setting up across the street. By the 6 o'clock news, Ethan's face would be all over San Francisco, the golden boy of Silicon Valley, arrested for fraud. Catherine must have been watching, absolutely mortified. Back at my hotel suite, I dropped onto the sofa while Sarah poured us some water. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since we left the courthouse. I scrolled through a flood of notifications, a mix of disbelief and overwhelming support. A text from my hairdresser. Just saw the news. Go get him, honey. From Ethan's best friend from Stanford. Ava, this is a misunderstanding, right? Ethan would never ever do this. Then 4 quick texts from our neighbors. Each one basically said, we always knew that guy was too slick to be true. But the most crucial text was from Julian Vance, Ethan's co-founder. Ava, call me. There are things about the fund you need to know. Things the feds haven't found yet. Sarah read it over my shoulder. Arrange a meeting. And make sure you record the entire conversation. At 4 p.m., the local news officially broke the story. The headline ran across the bottom of the screen. Prominent VC arrested for embezzlement, allegedly abandoned wife. And there was his mugshot. He looked hollow, his perfectly styled hair a wreck, his custom-tailored shirt replaced by a cheap, wrinkled orange jumpsuit. A reporter was doing a live shot from outside our house, my house laying out the whole ugly scandalsy. Sources claim Ethan Sterling left his wife stranded during last night's severe storm, more than 30 miles from their home. This morning, he was arrested on charges of misappropriating $5.4 million from his firm's latest fund. His wife, Ava Sterling, has not issued a statement. My phone rang. It was my sister, Maya. This time I picked up. Ava, please, you have to let me explain everything. You told him about Dad's trust, didn't you? About his mom's inheritance. You told him everything. There was a thick silence on the line. Then her voice cracked. He said he was trying to help. He said you were too stressed to manage it all, and he wanted to take that burden off you. He even paid off your student loans. I had no idea where the money was coming from. I thought he loved you so much. He told me you were emotionally fragile and needed his protection. I thought of all the casual calls from Maya over the past year. How's the estate being settled? Did Mom's art collection ever get appraised? Are you thinking of investing any of that money? Each question was a secret intelligence-gathering mission for Ethan. He used you, Maya, he said softly, the same way he used everyone. Ava, I am so sorry. When I saw the news alert, my stomach just dropped. Please, can we talk? Sarah was shaking her head no, but I could hear the genuine agony in my sister's voice. She wasn't just afraid. She was devastated. Tomorrow, meet me for coffee, and you come alone. After I hung up, Ben opened his laptop. You need to see this. Ethan S. Company LinkedIn page was an absolute disaster zone. Limited partners were demanding answers. Former employees were sharing horror stories about his pockets management and shady accounting. One comment read, "He fired me for questioning the expense reports last quarter, and now I know why." But the real chaos was happening on Instagram, where Clara had gone on the attack. She was posting screenshots of their DMs, photos from private jet getaways paid for by the fund, and a long, theatrical post about how Ethan had lied to her. He told me his wife was emotionally unstable, she wrote. He said she was using their marriage to trap him and would ruin his career if he ever left. I believed his lies because he was so charismatic. I was a fool, but he is a master of deception. The photos were damning. Ethan and Clara drinking champagne on a yacht. Ethan and Clara at the same 5-star resort in Maui, where we spent our own anniversary. And a picture of Ethan and Clara in our home. She actually posted it before Instagram's moderators could take it down. By 6 p.m., Ethan's mother, Catherine, had her publicist issue a formal statement. Sarah read it off her phone, trying to suppress a smirk. The Sterling family is shocked by these baseless accusations. We believe this is a coordinated and vindictive attack by a disgruntled spouse seeking a lucrative divorce settlement. Ethan Sterling is a respected leader who has been victimized by a woman who married him for his status. Is she for real? Ben muttered. After what we saw today, my phone buzzed with another call. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. Ignoring Sarah's glare, I answered it. Mrs. Sterling? My name is Jessica Lynn from the Wall Street Journal. We're investigating a pattern of fraud in the venture capital world. Your husband's case seems to be a key piece of the puzzle. Would you be willing to share your side of the story? Sarah immediately took the phone from me. This is Ava Sterling's legal counsel. Please direct all future inquiries to my office. She ended the call and looked at me, her expression serious. Tomorrow, this story is going to be everywhere. Ethan didn't just blow up his own life. He might take down an entire network of his corrupt friends with him. The FBI is just getting started. I walked over to the window and stared out at the San Francisco skyline. Somewhere in a just cell, Ethan was probably huddled with his lawyers, desperately trying to figure out a way to spin this disaster. But you can't spin bank records, a scorned mistress with receipts, and millions of dollars that have simply vanished. My phone lit up again. It was a message from Robert Davies, Ethan's biggest limited partner. Mrs. Sterling, I wanted you to know a group of us are filing a civil suit against your husband. I must be clear. You are not a target. We know you are as much a victim as we are. In fact, we were hoping you'd consider testifying on our behalf." The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. For years, Ethan had told me I was too naive to understand his business, too emotional for the world of high-stakes finance. And now, the powerful men he'd scammed were asking for my help to bury him. As the city lights began to twinkle, I knew this was only the beginning of Ethan's long public fall from grace. Tomorrow would bring more headlines, more secrets, and more victims telling their stories. But tonight, for the first time in years, I could actually breathe. I wasn't listening for his car in the driveway, or bracing for one of his moods, or shrinking from his words that were designed to make me feel worthless. The man who left me in the dark had created his own black hole, and now it was swallowing him whole. The next morning, a firm knock on my hotel room door woke me from a deep sleep. Looking through the peephole, I saw Jennifer, a total wreck. Her hands trembled as she clutched a thick manila envelope, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. I opened the door but stayed in the doorway, blocking her entrance. "I couldn't wait until our meeting," she pleaded. "Diana, please, you have to see this before I talk to the FBI this afternoon." Victor moved to stand behind me, his presence a silent warning. I gave him a small nod. It was okay. I let Jennifer in, and she collapsed onto the armchair, placing this envelope on the table like it was a bomb. "About a year ago, Daniel called me," she began, her voice barely audible. "He knew about my debt. I don't know how, but he knew I owed almost $50,000 to a loan shark. He said he would wipe it clean, no strings attached, if I just helped him understand our family's financial situation. And you said yes," I stated, my voice devoid of any warmth. I was terrified. They were going to come to my office, Diana. They were going to destroy my reputation. Daniel made it sound so noble. He said you were too proud to ask for help, and he wanted to surprise you by solving your money problems. She fumbled with the clasps on the envelope, pulling out a sheaf of printed emails. "This is everything. Every conversation we had. I printed them all out last night after I saw the news." I took the top page. It was an email from Daniel from 14 months ago. His words were so caring, so brotherly. He claimed he just wanted to understand our family dynamics so he could be a better, more supportive husband. The whole thing was a masterclass in manipulation. He was obsessed with Mom. Jennifer choked out. Her health, her mental state, her portfolio. I thought he was planning a surprise for her, like getting her a better nurse. "You told him she had Alzheimer's." Jennifer just nodded, tears streaming down her face. "She told me not to tell you. Said she didn't want you to worry, that you had enough on your plate with Julian being so difficult. But he was so convincing, so charming. He said he saw signs of cognitive decline and just wanted to help her manage things." I kept scrolling. The chat logs showed Julian-esque questions getting more specific. What properties did our parents still own? Were there any trusts? Who was the executor of their wills? My sister answered everything, thinking she was helping her brother-in-law protect our family. Last month, he asked her to get Mom to sign some papers, saying they were for insurance to protect her assets. My sister actually brought them to her, Clara. Luckily, Mom's wealth manager was there and realized they were asset transfer agreements. That S when my sister knew something was deeply wrong. My phone rang. It was Ben, my PI. I put him on speaker so Alex could hear. "Mrs. Mitchell, sorry to call so late, but this is major. I've been digging into Julian-esque client list. He wasn't just skimming from the company. He was systematically targeting his elderly clients, especially recent widows." "What do you mean, targeting?" "Take Eleanor Hartley. Her husband passed 2 years ago, left her a fortune, and personally asked Julian to manage the estate. 6 months later, Julian had convinced her to sign over power of attorney. She thought it was just for routine stock trades. Instead, he used it to drain her accounts. A wave of nausea hit me. Eleanor Hartley was 78. I knew her from company parties, a lovely woman who was always showing pictures of her grandkids. How much did he take from her? Almost $800,000. But that's not the worst part. He convinced her that her memory was failing, that she'd forgotten approving the withdrawals. He gaslit an old woman into thinking she had dementia. Alex was already taking notes, documenting every detail for the authorities. This changed everything. Julian wasn't just some white-collar thief. He was a predator, deliberately hunting the most vulnerable people imaginable. I have digital records, Alex continued. I started mirroring the server 2 years ago when I noticed financial irregularities. I was building a case, but I was afraid. Julian has powerful friends. But now that he's been arrested, I am giving the feds everything. After Alex finished, he pulled up one more encrypted file on his laptop. There's one more thing. It's about Dad's estate. Our father died 5 years ago, leaving what we believed was a very modest inheritance for us. But the document on the screen told a completely different story. It was a trust account, established in my name only, the year before he passed. He knew about my spending habits back then, Alex said quietly. He loved me, but he didn't trust me not to be reckless. So he created this for you with Mom as the trustee. It's worth nearly $2 million. Julian found out about it somehow, and he's been trying to access it for months. I stared at the screen. $2 million, hidden by my father to protect it from my brother's impulsiveness, and from the clutches of a husband he never even met. The account was with a small private bank in Vermont, one Julian never would have found without hacking my family's files. We need to go see Mom, Alex said. Right now. She has something for you, something she wouldn't even tell me about. She just said she was waiting for the right moment. An hour later, we were in our mother's suite at the Memory Care Center. It was one of her good days. Her eyes were sharp and focused as she grabbed my hand. I knew what he was the moment I met him, she said, her voice clearer than it had been in years. The way he looked at our paintings like he was appraising them. The way he always steered every conversation back to money. Your father saw it too. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a small, old-fashioned key. Safe deposit box at the First Republic on Michigan Avenue. Your father put some things away the week before he died. Documents. Real proof. Proof of what, Mom? Julian tried to forge my signature last year. On loan applications and property deeds. The bank president was an old friend of your father S. He called me immediately and sent copies of everything. It's all in that box. I took the key. Its cold weight feeling heavy in my palm. My father was protecting me from beyond the grave. And my mother, through the fog of her illness, had been protecting him. There's more, Mom whispered, tightening her grip. The FBI was here yesterday. It wasn't about Julian's arrest. It was about something much bigger. They told her his name appeared in a massive 3-year investigation. A whole network of wealth managers defrauding elderly clients across the country. The air in the room felt suddenly thick, hard to breathe. Julian didn't just leave me on that curb to be cruel. He knew federal agents were closing in. He wanted me shattered and compliant, a perfect shield or a convenient scapegoat when his entire world came crashing down. He never imagined you would fight back, my mother said, a faint smile on her lips. Men like that never do. They always mistake a woman's kindness for weakness. They always so shocked when they learn they wrong. As we got ready to leave, my mother held my hand one last time. Your father would be so proud of you, Clara. You are so much stronger than Julian could ever comprehend. Driving away from the center, with Alex beside me, I thought about the intricate web of lies Julian had woven. Every new piece of evidence revealed the true depth of his corruption. He wasn't just a cheating husband or a crooked financier. He was a key player in a network of financial predators who had destroyed countless lives. But he made one fatal error. He assumed the woman he left standing in the rain would just stand there and drown. Instead, she had become the hurricane that was about to tear down everything he had built on the pain of other people. The First Republic Bank on Michigan Avenue was a fortress of old money and quiet secrets. Alex waited in the car while our lawyer escorted me inside. The safe deposit box my mother had guarded was waiting in a temperature-controlled room. The bank manager, Mr. Harrison, remembered my father fondly and handled the box with a solemn respect, as if he understood he was part of something important. Inside were documents that made my whole body tremble. Forged loan applications bearing my signature, dated just 6 months prior. Property deeds for my grandfather's cabin, which Julian had clearly tried to sell without my knowledge. It wasn't bank statements, but a hidden server my brother Alex found on our home network. He was a cybersecurity expert, and he cracked folders named after Greek gods, Julian's little inside joke. Alex had found everything. A note on a digital file for a forged power of attorney was the password hint. She'll never figure this out. Ben, my private investigator, photographed every single document while I just sat there, completely numb. Julian's web of deceit was deeper than I ever imagined. This wasn't just about a broken marriage or the stolen money. He was systematically dismantling my entire financial life, trying to make me completely dependent on him, or even worse, set me up to take the fall. Months later, I stepped into the federal courthouse for the first day of Julian's criminal trial. The media storm had grown even wilder since his arrest. News vans lined the block. Reporters screamed questions I refused to answer. I wore a tailored navy blue suit I had bought just for this moment. It was sharp, dignified, and expensive enough to scream that I was not a victim. Julian was at the defendant's table, swimming in a suit that was now too big for him. He'd lost a lot of weight in custody, and his usually perfect hair was a mess. When his eyes met mine, I smiled. It was the same calm, knowing smile I'd give him over breakfast when he lectured me about my supposed spending problem. But this smile carried the weight of his secrets and the life he was about to lose. The prosecutor, a sharp AUSA named David Chen, laid out the case perfectly. 12 counts of wire fraud, 2 of elder abuse, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. Cooked books, secret offshore accounts, forged signatures, and even damning recorded calls of Julian bragging about duping his clients. For 11 days, one witness after another took the stand. Elderly investors explained how Julian had charmed them into signing away their life savings. Former co-workers described being ordered to fake financial records. A forensic accountant walked the jury through the tangled maze of shell corporations Julian had built. Then, on the 12th day, the courtroom doors opened and Isabella Rossi walked in. She looked nothing like the glamorous woman who once wore a diamond necklace I recognized as a family heirloom. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple dress, her hair pulled back. She had been granted full immunity for her testimony, and she looked ready to burn Julian's world to the ground. "Ms. Rossi," the prosecutor began, "how long were you romantically involved with the defendant?" 18 months, she said, her voice steady and clear. "And during that time, did Mr. Mitchell ever discuss his business with you?" "Yes, all the time. He thought it was a game, describing how he moved money around without anyone noticing. He called it playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers." She produced phone recordings where Julian boasted about preying on older clients, hiding assets from me, and his plan to vanish to the Cayman Islands once he'd stolen enough. In one recording, his voice was chillingly clear, saying Clara's the perfect cover. So sweet, so trusting. She never asks questions. By the time she figures it out, I'll be long gone, and she'll be the one explaining everything. But Isabella S.'s biggest bombshell landed at the end of her testimony. 3 weeks before his trial, Marcus told me he was leaving me too. He had another woman in Dubai, an architect he'd met on a work trip. He planned to dump his mistress just like he was dumping his wife. The look on Marcus's face was worth all the agony he'd put me through. His jaw went completely slack. His lawyer was hissing in his ear, but the bomb had already gone off. His mistress just told the court he was playing everybody. The next day brought another bombshell. A young man named Ryan Carter was called to the stand. 22 years old, he had Marcus's same intense eyes and confident smirk. The prosecutor got straight to the point. He was Marcus S.'s son from a college fling, a secret he had buried for over 2 decades. Ryan testified, "My mother got $2,000 a month from Marcus Thorne for 22 years to keep quiet about me. She has every receipt. The money was wired from his investor escrow accounts." I watched Marcus seem to physically shrink in his chair. Ryan went on. He told my mom if she ever told his family or the press, he'd ruin her reputation and blacklist her from her profession. She has that threat in an email. The prosecutor then showed 22 years of wire transfers, all coming from the accounts Marcus used in his real estate fraud. He wasn't just stealing from investors to fund his car collection, but to silence the ghosts of his past. Marcus' attorney tried to object, calling it a smear campaign and irrelevant, but Judge Miller cut him off, saying it showed a clear, lifelong pattern of deceit and financial crime. On the last day, Marcus made the colossal error of taking the stand. Ignoring his lawyer's frantic glare, he walked to the witness box, convinced he could charm his way out of this mess. For 2 hours, he wove a fantasy where he was the victim. He swore I knew all about his affairs and that I didn't too care as long as the money kept coming. He claimed his wealthy investors had approved every single risky move. He was a visionary, he said, who made a few tiny clerical mistakes. But then the cross-examination started, and Marcus's entire narrative just crumbled. When faced with the encrypted ledgers, he said they were fakes. When shown the forged building permits, he suggested I might have forged them to frame him. When asked about paying Ryan's mother, he snarled, "That was a personal matter, totally unrelated to my business." The jury was out for less than 90 minutes. As the foreman got up to read the verdict, I held my brother David's hand on one side and my lawyer Isabel's on the other. On count 1, wire fraud, we the jury find the defendant guilty. On count 2, money laundering, we find the defendant guilty. By the time she reached count 12, Marcus had buried his face in his hands. Guilty on all charges. The man who told me I was delusional for being suspicious was now trapped in his own cold, hard reality. 2 weeks later, we returned for the sentencing. Judge Miller, who'd sat through the entire circus, gazed down at Marcus with pure contempt. "Mr. Thorne, you didn't just steal money, you stole people's dreams. You betrayed the trust of your partners, your investors, and your family. You have shown zero remorse and taken zero responsibility, even with this mountain of evidence. This court sentences you to 120 months in federal prison with no chance of early parole. 10 years. Marcus was going away for a decade. As the U.S. Marshals moved to cuff him, he locked eyes with me. "This isn't over," he mouthed. I rose to my feet, my voice clear and loud enough for the court microphones. "You're right. The civil lawsuits start next Tuesday. The marshals cuffed him and led him away, and I walked out of that courthouse into a bright afternoon that felt like the very first day of my life." The investor lawsuits were coming, with dozens of families desperate for justice. But that was Isabel's battle to command. I had something more important to build. The whistleblower payment came 6 weeks after Marcus was sentenced. Almost $3 million for helping the feds recover the stolen funds. That money, plus the assets I was awarded and a trust my parents had set up, gave me the means to turn all my pain into a purpose. My friend Liam found the perfect building, an old brick warehouse in Austin's SoCo district that had been a design studio. It had 2 floors, a dozen offices, a huge open area for workshops, and more importantly, 4 separate, secure exits for people escaping abusive situations. We signed the papers on a Friday. By Monday, the Lighthouse Initiative had a physical home. "We're going to need a serious security system," Liam said, pacing the empty rooms while typing on his tablet. "Panic buttons, keycard access, and cameras that protect our clients instead of just recording them." Isabel showed up with boxes of encrypted servers and legal software. "I've already got 4 forensic accountants who want to volunteer," she announced. "The word is spreading in the finance community about what you're doing." Isabel even took a sabbatical from her law firm to help me launch our own in-house legal aid clinic. "We have to be absolutely perfect with this," she warned, laying out the incorporation papers on a table. "We're going to be fighting controlling spouses, high-powered lawyers, and worse. Every single detail has to be bulletproof." A month later, we took on our first client, a woman named Anna. Her husband, a big-shot tech founder, had hidden all their assets in offshore crypto accounts and threatened to have her deported if she ever left him. Isabel started tracing the blockchain. Liam brought in a cybersecurity expert. I just sat with Anna while she sobbed, remembering my own helpless tears the night Marcus walked out. That Thursday, Jenna showed up at our door, 4 months sober, with a box of pastries as a peace offering. "I have to help," she said, her voice soft. "I know what it's like to be used as a weapon in someone's war, to be so trapped you end up hurting people you never wanted to. Maybe I can help other women recognize the manipulation before they get in too deep." We started her off as a volunteer, handling calls and organizing files. But Jenna had this amazing ability to connect with women at their lowest point. She understood the cycle of shame and coercion in a way that even our best therapists couldn't fully grasp. 6 months later, she was leading our main support group, explaining how Marcus had used her and teaching others how to spot those tactics. My mother visited on a sunny afternoon, with Ryan driving her through a city she'd barely seen in years. She sat in my office, looking at the photos on my wall women who gave us permission to share their success stories, smiling in new apartments or at graduations with their kids. "Your father would be so incredibly proud," she whispered, touching a picture of a single mom now in medical school. "He always said the only way to fight darkness is to create more light." Then she pulled a worn envelope from her purse. "This was delivered to the house for you. I figured you should be one to see it." Inside was a short article clipped from the prison newsletter. Marcus had been chosen to run an inmate workshop on ethical investing. Even locked away, he was still working to polish his image as a brilliant, misunderstood man of finance. The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh out loud. 7 months after the verdict, a very unexpected volunteer appeared. Tessa was standing in our reception area, looking nothing like the architect from the tabloids. Her hair was different, her designer suit replaced by a simple dress. She carried herself with a kind of quiet strength I had never seen in her before. "I've been in a lot of therapy," she said as she sat down in my office. "I'm trying to understand how I fell for a man like Marcus, why I ignored so many warnings, and why I let him use me to hurt you. I know I can't take back what I did, but maybe I can prevent other young professionals from making the same mistakes." She began speaking at business schools, talking to students about powerful mentors who dangle opportunities in exchange for compromise. She was brutally honest about her own ambition, taking full responsibility while detailing the slow, methodical manipulation that made it all seem so glamorous. He made me feel like I was the most brilliant person in the room, she told a group of MBA students one evening, like I was his partner in genius. By the time I realized I was just another line item on his balance sheet, I was in too deep to escape. A year after Marcus's sentencing, a letter arrived at the foundation. His handwriting was still perfect, even on cheap prison paper. It was page after page of pure poison, accusing me of orchestrating his ruin, claiming I'd plotted against him from day one. He listed every single perceived slight, every argument he now saw as part of my master plan. The final sentence read, "I trust you've learned not to cross a man like me." I had that letter professionally framed and hung it on the wall right next to my law degree. When a client would ask about it, I'd tell them the honest truth. Oh, yes, I definitely learned my lesson. I learned that when someone shows you how cruel they can be, you believe them the very first time. I learned that meticulous planning and a little patience can tear down a fortress of lies. And most importantly, I learned that the best revenge against someone who tries to destroy you is to become indestructible and then use that strength to help everyone else build their own fortress. 18 months after that night, I stood in my office looking at a wall covered in photos and thank you notes. The Lighthouse Initiative had helped 92 women find their way to a safe harbor. Some just needed an accountant. Others needed a complete reinvention, new homes, new jobs, new lives. They all come to us the same way, broken, believing they have no options left. One of Etheria's first investors, a woman Mark had nearly wiped out, became our foundation's biggest donor. After we helped her sue Mark's estate and get her money back, she dedicated herself to our cause. "That man made me think I was a fool," she said at our last gala. Jessica and Sarah just helped me find my voice. Outside, a storm was rolling in over the bay, the rain tapping against the glass. I thought of that night on the service road, soaked to the bone, as Mark drove away, certain he had won. He thought he was teaching me about power, about staying in my place. But what he really taught me was that lies have a short shelf life, that every betrayal has a price, and that the woman you abandon in a storm learns how to command the thunder. All his calculated cruelty became the very fuel I used to fight back for myself, and for all the others he conned. The final lesson, the one Ethan never saw coming, wasn't about weakness. It was about strength. He tried to leave me with nothing. Instead, he gave me a cause. If this story of epic karma resonates with you, do me a quick favor and hit that like button. My favorite moment was seeing his perfect, smug mugshot plastered all over the news, that mask of the untouchable venture capitalist finally stripped away for good. What was your favorite part of Ava's revenge story? Drop a line in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more tales of justice being served.